Friends, with joyful hearts, together let us worship God.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name.
The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. You're rich in love and you're slow to anger. Name is great and your heart is kind. For all your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. And on that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near and my time has come, still my soul will sing your praise unending. 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. Oh, I'll worship your holy name. Lord, I'll worship your holy name.
Because I am confident that you all have voices just like Jen and Scott, we're going to sing now. Please stand as we join together in singing our community song. Let us pray. Gracious and everlasting God, how good it is to gather this day. We thank you for the safety and warmth of this place, for the bright sunshine, for the opportunity to take an hour and reflect on who it is you call us to be, and for the joy of being surrounded by family and friends. Lord, bless us with open hearts and open minds, and inspire us to go from this place in an hour or so to live the lives you call us to live as children of peace and love and grace. Amen. As the kids meet the cooks in back to head off to Sunday school, please offer a warm greeting to those whom you're seated near. Friends, thank you all for joining us for this service of worship. And we particularly welcome those of you who are with us for the first time or our guests. If you'd like, on your way out, please take a moment and leave your name on the back table. There's a little green book if you'd like to leave your name and email address. And that would allow us the opportunity to send some propaganda your way and let you know about the kinds of things we have going on in the days and weeks ahead. Also, would like to invite you all to coffee hour, which is in Reed Hall. I know Ellie Randolph has made some fabulous treats, and coffee hour is found through the doors right there, and taking 10 cold steps to the room next door. There's coffee and treats and anything like that, and that's right after the service. I want to say thank you to Scott and Jen and Ken Hall for providing music today. Thank you. And also to the Randolphs for greeting and treating, as we say, and also to Susie Von Bork for beautiful flowers today. So thank you, Susie. There is a song by the band Faces with the provocative title, Ooh La La. Do you know that song? The won't leave your head lyric of the tune that anyone with a wrinkle or two can relate to goes like this. I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger. I wish that I knew what I knew now when I was younger. Something like that. Many of you have heard it. How easy it is for every one of us with a little bit of life underneath our belts to reflect upon all those things that we do differently if we had the chance to do it all over again. And boy, is it easy to think about those things that we'd never do, if only we knew then the kinds of things that we know now. Maybe you would have pursued the career of your dreams rather than what you feel like your family pushed you into. Maybe you wouldn't have gotten behind the wheel that night. Or you and I wouldn't have tricked ourselves into thinking that something was really cool that actually was both stupid and dangerous. Maybe you wouldn't have allowed yourself to stay in an abusive relationship for years. Maybe you might not care so much what other people think. I bet that there's people out there, if having the chance to do it all over again, wouldn't have taken most of their life savings for that sure thing investment that promised unbelievable returns, that company that manufactured 8-track players. Or maybe some wouldn't have bought that McMansion dream home 20 years ago, that home that no millennial these days would touch with a 10-foot pole. I wish I knew what I know now when I was younger. There's so much we'd likely change, but mind you, if we listen to those lyrics, or read those lyrics rather, through the lens of the Christian faith and tradition, and really think about Jesus' values and teaching, there's not a lot of room for lamenting the past. Because you see, the past is the past. The only thing that you and I can do with the sometimes polluted water that flows underneath the bridge of our lives is to let it flow. First, because we can't do anything about it but learn. Second, because we rather amazingly belong to a God who doesn't say to us, you know, I'm going to love you if, or I'll love you when you get your act together. Instead, that God simply says, I love you as you are right now. And you know who understands that best? Those of you who are parents. Because that's exactly how you love your child. And they may tick you off, and they may cause you to want to pull your hair out at times, but you know what? There's not anything that they can do that would cause you to stop loving them. That's the kind of love that God has for us. There are no boundaries or limits. The other reason to not let the past drive our lives, it seems to me that if God can cut us some slack, we ought to be able to cut ourselves some slack and give ourselves a break for all those times that we've messed up because we didn't know back then what it is we know now. There's no reason for us to live our lives shackled to the past because of frustration and guilt for the untold times we made the wrong decision. Now, when we hear that line, I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger, it seems to me, rather than focus on what we would have done differently back then, why not let it be a springboard to a dream? And let us think about all those things that we can do from this point forward because what we'd learned along the way. I can't speak for you, but for me, knowing what I learned the last half century, I think I'm going to listen even less to the naysayers in my life, whom over the years I think I've given way too much power to. I'm going to spend even less time caring about how things have always been done, and maybe spend more time daring to listen to that voice of God in my heart who's nudging me this direction or that direction. Friends, we're not called to lament the past and live impeded by guilt because of what we didn't know back then. We're called to use what we've learned to grow as people who belong to God and as people who have a purpose on this planet. So who do you suppose you're called to be? That's what we'll tackle in just a moment. It is in your name we offer these prayers as well as the unspoken prayers of our hearts, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.
This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your holy presence living in me. This is my daily bread. This is my daily bread. Your very word spoken to me. And I This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your holy presence living in me. This is my daily bread. This is my daily bread. Your very word spoken to me. I'm desperate for you. And I'm lost without you. I'm desperate for you. I'm lost without you. I'm lost without you. I'm lost without you. This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe.
Thank you. The passage for this morning comes to us from the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3. It's the portion that follows a very familiar passage of Scripture where for everything there is a season, a time for everything under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, etc., etc. And this is chapter 3, verses 9 through 16. For what gain have the workers from their toil? For I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. God has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, God has put a sense of past and future into them, reminds that yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. And I know that there is nothing but to be better than for them to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and even take pleasure in their toil. I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done this so that all should stand in awe before God. That which is already has been. That which is to be already is. And God seeks out what has gone by. Amen. You can have a seat, ladies. Are you all in shock? I lost a bet. I'm not much of a gambler, but this past December I did make a gentleman's wager with my dear friend J.O. Sharman over here in purple. And I guess you can tell I lost. The bet was that my alma mater, the University of Utah, would wallop the Northwestern Wildcats when they played in the Holiday Bowl on December 31st past. And the deal was this: if Utah won, which I expected the Utes would do, if Utah won, then Jay would have to come to church wearing a Utah football jersey and stand up during joys and concerns and talk about how fortunate the people of this church were to have a minister who received such a fine education at the place some call the Harvard of the Intermountain West. And if Northwestern won, which unbelievably happened after Utah was leading 21-0 at halftime, they scored, I think, 28 points in the third quarter, Northwestern did, to surprise everyone and win the Holiday Bowl. And the deal was that I would have to preach in some Northwestern garb. Jay was nice enough to get me this shirt reminding me of the score. The challenge is when you look like this on a Sunday morning, how do you preach? What do you say? What do you do? I was befuddled. I was nonplussed. I was flummoxed. Those are all the kinds of Utah words that Marina and I learned when we were at the University of Utah. We call that University of Utah patois. And so I realized that my only hope on this Sunday, when I just didn't feel equipped to preach, was to bring someone else far better equipped for this job than I. Jay, come here. Come here. We'll get a quick picture of you and me and Willie here. Yay! Hey! Come on up and just take a quick picture here with Jay. You got a picture? Thank you. Thank you, Willie. Thank you. All right. We're good. Jay, congratulations. You won.
You went above and beyond. I hope I don't lose next year.
So here's the fantastic news. We have what I'm quite confident will be an extraordinary message this morning by Willie the Wildcat. I was thinking you were going to preach this morning, Willie. All right. All right. Willie tells me that he would be far more comfortable spending the next few minutes with the kids across the street at Sunday school than preaching this morning. So let's give thanks to Willie for, Willie, give me 5, baby. Thank you. All right. Right? Yeah. Okay, you don't need to rub it in. Get out of here. Oh. That'll teach you to bet, right? Now, you all wondered what was going to happen in church on Sunday when I sent out that note, right? But wasn't it correct? You've never had this happen at your church service before. Here's the question. And by the way, Ken, what time is it?
I have no idea.
What is it? 10:42. Oh, 10:42. Okay. I'll go quickly. Here's the question: how do you follow a mascot with a sermon, right? And what came into my mind was a time just before I moved here 30 years ago. I was the interim minister for 6 months at a church down in Oak Lawn, and I was called to lead the memorial service in the most old-fashioned, tiny little funeral parlor in Oak Lawn that was filled with lots of gold and red velvet everywhere. And the gentleman whose service I was doing was a veteran, and he was in an open casket with his uniform on, and his body had changed over the years, and so, there was a button and then a big opening and a button and a big opening. And then standing on each side of him in the same kind of situation, two gentlemen who were veterans but whose bodies had changed were standing at attention, with those fake rifles. And so it was kind of a weird thing. Gentleman with an open casket, one of his buddies standing here, I'm standing here, and it was just about time for me to offer the message or the sermon, but we had arranged with the funeral director and also with his wife for them to have a friend of theirs come in and do some music. And so in from the back walks, this is the absolute truth, an Elvis imitator. With the hair, with the outfit, a little guitar that he strummed, and a lip that kind of went around, like Elvis's lip did. And I said, man, have I made the big times now. So following Willie the Wildcat's not as bad as following an Elvis imitator. What I'm going to do, albeit in an abbreviated way, is stick with what I had planned, which was the second part of a three-part series based on the writings of the late Pastor Forrest Church, who during his life, towards the last 10 years or so, had this creed that he went by. And he said, here's how to think about life. Want what you have, do what you can, and be who you are. Want what you have, do what you can, and be who you are. And 2 weeks ago, we tackled this notion of want what you have. And if you were here, I had a window with like 8 different panes, and each one of those panes represents an area of our life. And one is family and work and our significant other and our health and our interests, et cetera, and our children. And almost never does it work out in such a way that the light is shining brightly through all 8 panes or however many panes in our lives, that typically there's 1 or 2 that are clouded. And the challenge for us is that we tend to focus on those panes that are clouded and become obsessed with that. And what church reminds us, Reverend Forrest Church, is to never ever forget that there may be 1 or 2 that are cloudy, but don't spend all our time focusing on them, because there are another 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 that are clear and reminding us that life is so good. And this morning, we're going to skip over Do What You Can, which will be next Sunday, and focus on the third one, which is Be Who You Are. Be who you are sounds almost kind of silly, like it's some sort of throwaway line. Yet the more I thought about it, the more it struck me that figuring out who we are, mind you, it's not what we do. What we do is how we spend our time, okay? But who we are or who we want to be is sort of the essence of our being and how we want to live our lives. And figuring that out, I think, is one of life's absolute greatest challenges. And in another departure this morning, I'm not going to be particularly biblical, forgive me for that, but I'm just going to tell you a story or two. Yesterday, I returned to my hometown of Glen Ellen in the western suburbs, and whereas I had about as good a life for the first 12 or 14 years of my life as any kid could have living there, it's not always easy to go back. I don't know if some of you experienced that. And it wasn't easy this particular time because I was leading the funeral of my sister's best friend for over 50 years. They had been friends since 3rd grade. And it was also held in a church that was laden with all kinds of memories for me. It was the church where I was baptized. Now, I don't remember being baptized, but my mother tells me that I grabbed hold of the minister's necktie and looked like I was trying to strangle him. And I was also confirmed at that church, and I was ordained at that church, and my father's funeral was at that church. So there's all this stuff going on. And then after we're driving through Glen Ellen, I noticed how much had changed, and I headed to the reception. And it was held at the country club that my family had belonged to. And that place, too, was filled with all kinds of memories. I still blame their rather weak junior golf program for my being a below-average golfer today. Maybe after a half century, I should let it go. And being there for 10 minutes and having absolutely no desire for any post-funeral chit-chat with folks at 11:15 in the morning who were already drinking Bloody Marys, I split for the men's locker room, which was dimly lit and closed for the season. And I wandered around by myself, and I looked at familiar plaques on the walls and trophies on the shelves and black and white pictures that go back to the days in the 1940s when my dad's parents were members. And on the wall across from the lockers were members' pictures. After all these years, there were still plenty of faces and names that I remembered. Most interesting were the pictures of friends whom I'd grown up with. And I couldn't help, as I sat there on one of the benches, but reflect on the fact that up until the time my dad died when I was a high school freshman, I always sort of assumed that my picture would be up there. You see, I always hoped that my life would be exactly like my dad's, who frankly was about as good a guy as ever set foot on this earth. I just figured I'd live in Glen Ellen, and I'd work at the family company, and I'd be married and have a nice wife and some wonderful kids, and I'd coach lots of Little League, and I'd play golf at the club where my kids would also learn to swim. And in the absolute silence and stillness of that locker room, I couldn't help but wonder, is that who I was supposed to be? I wondered that. I wondered if that who I was supposed to be until death sideswiped that destiny and my father died at age 40. Be who you are, offers Forest Church. Be who you are. This throwaway line, but if you think about it, it's the great challenge of our lives. And one of the reasons it's such a challenge is because so many of us, like young Tom Dickelman, just want to play follow the leader. Be who you are is tough because we're pretty comfortable stepping into the shoes of those we followed, people whom we love and admire and whom we perceive as having had a great life. And we say, hey, where do I sign up for that? But it's not necessarily who we are. Be who you are is tough because so many in our world have their lives dictated to them from the time they're young because of where they've grown up or who their parents are. Many of you were at Gorton, or some of you were at Gorton last night, seeing a number of extraordinary movies. One of them told the story of a young Sherpa. Now, the Sherpas in Nepal, most all of them, the males, don't get an education. And if they don't, then they're forced to become porters, the people who haul the stuff up the side of Mount Everest and other mountains. It's one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Sometimes our families and where we grew up dictates who we are. Be who you are is tough because we still live in a world where our lives are shaped, as Martin Luther King offered, more by the color of our skin than by the content of our character. Be who you are is tough for women still in our society because there are so many arenas where they are not fully welcome, and if they do get in the door, they seldom earn as much as men. Be who you are, and I will say this because I've experienced it. Be who you are, believe it or not, is tough for white men. Because not only are they sometimes passed by because they're not a minority or a woman, but also it seems like the world is pointing a finger at white guys and saying, you know what? You guys are the reason this world is such a mess. Be who you are is tough because of family and social pressures. How do you think the conversation goes in some of the households in these communities when a child says to mom or dad, you know, I just don't want to go to college? Be who you are is tough in our world because there are lots of broken families and people with no resources, and because we don't necessarily give everyone the same chance. In the state of Illinois, do you think you get the same education, the same opportunity if you go to Waukegan High School as you do if you go to Lake Forest? Ben Sass in the book Them puts it this way, you know what, to get the chance to be who we are in life, we need to be fortunate enough to grow up with shoulders. And what that means is not shoulders like these, but you know when you're driving down the road and maybe you're distracted or you're tired and your car starts to veer off the road a little bit and you hit that rumble strip, and it reminds you to get back on the right path again? That's a shoulder. And you know what? There's lots of places in this world and lots of people who aren't fortunate enough to have shoulders to get them back on track. And there's a lot of people who only make one mistake, and that's it. And I don't know about you, but I was lucky enough to have more shoulders in my life than I could ever count. It's tough to be who you are. And if that is your life struggle right now, you absolutely need to know that you are not alone. Let me close with a thought that, once again, isn't driven by Scripture, but instead by more than half a century of experience of someone who has battled more with that question of who am I supposed to be than anyone I know. And of course, it's me. And it also goes against the grain. One more thing that's wacky about this service, because I don't believe when I stand up here on Sundays that I'm ever supposed to point a finger at myself and say, well, here's how you do it. Because more often than not, it's just the opposite, okay? But even though I don't see myself as the shell answer man, I need to share this. And it's because I feel like I've struggled as much as anyone I know with who I'm supposed to be, and you'll understand that in just a second. And it's also compounded by the fact that I'm one of those people on this planet that really believes those motivational speaker types who say, you know what, you can do anything you want to do. And that's kind of a good thing, but it's kind of a difficult thing too. So it means my journey has included just about everything. And if I could somehow, I don't know how many pages long my resume would be. It starts out after college, and it wasn't a great beginning. Tending bar in the state of Utah is not a good career move. But it includes tending bar and selling dental pharmaceuticals and being a consultant to not-for-profits and small businesses, and starting a company called Wind Blessed Weddings and another company called Top Cat Components that sold heavy-duty truck parts and vehicular hardware to the Postal Service. I sold used foundry equipment and menswear at Mark Shale and was special assistant to the president here at Lake Forest College. Took 2 years to stay in Utah and ski after college. And I spent a year of sailing down in Florida after college, long after college, and actually after seminary, where I supported myself by cleaning rental condos. I offered sales and 360 feedback programs around North America and somehow got a doctorate and have also been a minister for over 35 years. And if you listen to that and say, this guy is nuts and I can't imagine that I'm listening to him, I totally get that. But here's the other side of the story. Is I feel like in the last 10 years, maybe 12 years, at long last, I've gotten to that Forest Church place of be who you are. And what I'm doing right now, the purple outfit notwithstanding, is absolutely who and what I'm supposed to be. And I got to that place, and here's what you might remember. I got to that place to be who I am finally, because I chose to see life in Kierkegaardian terms that says, life is an adventure to be lived, not a problem to be solved. I finally got to that place of being who I am because all along, even though there's been peaks and valleys, I absolutely have believed that I belonged to a God who loved me no matter what. Do you know the kind of freedom that brings to your life? Knowing you are loved in that kind of way? Third, I came to finally be who I am by finding opportunities in prayer and meditation, and sometimes just moving to another part of the planet to get away from all the noise and all the people who are saying, well, you ought to do this or you ought to do that. I retreated, and that was key. And I came finally to be who I am by simply paying attention to my life and trying to figure out what were those moments when I felt most alive. And finally, I realized those moments are right here, right now, with all of you. Amen.
Been looking for a sound that makes my heart sing. Been looking for a melody that makes the church bells ring. Not looking for the fame or the fortune it might bring in love, in music, and in life. Jesus preached the golden rule. Buddha taught it too. Gandhi said eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind. With a little understanding, can break these chains that we've been handed. I've got the medication, love is the remedy. Pray to be stronger and wiser. Oh, you get only what you give. Love one another. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I've been thinking of the Lord that I'll be leaving. Been looking for a truth that I can't believe in. Got everything I need. still finding my way down this winding road, holding on to what I love, yeah, then leaving the rest behind in love, in music and in life. Pray to be stronger and wiser. Oh, you get only what you give. Love one another. We're all in this world together. Life's a gift that we have to treasure. Happiness now, that is the measure. Love is a remedy.
Love is a remedy.
Everyone can be forgiven. One love and one religion. Open up your heart and listen. Love is a remedy. But pray to be stronger and wiser. Oh, you'll get only what you give. Oh, God is love one another. Amen. Amen.
Scott and Jen, thank you. So it seems to me if there's one key to getting to the place where we're moving in the direction, at very least, of becoming who it is we're called to be deep in our souls, it seems to me that it comes in paying attention to our lives. And through my thick but highly trained University of Utah brain, what I finally realized is I was the same guy, which is basically a minister. It just didn't matter if I was in a church or if I was hanging around with a group of derelicts in a marina down in Florida in Fort Myers Beach, or if I was cleaning condos, or if I was sitting in an old foundry trying to move some used foundry equipment, sitting there with the folks who'd lost their jobs when this place closed. That's just who I was. And I guess it just took me a really long time to figure out that's who I am and that's who I was supposed to be. And what I did really didn't matter. So keep an eye open. Keep your heart open to those times in your life when you feel most alive. Go in peace. Thank you for your grace and putting up with a periodically flaky minister. And the people said, Amen.
Lord of all creation, of water, earth, and sky, the heavens are your tabernacle. Glory to the Lord on high, God of wonders beyond our galaxy. You are holy, holy. Universe declares your majesty. You are holy, holy, Lord of heaven and earth. Lord of heaven and earth. beyond our galaxy. You are holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, holy, Lord of heaven and earth. Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah to the Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah to the Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah to the Lord of heaven and earth. God of wonders beyond our galaxy. You are holy, holy. Precious Lord, reveal your heart to me. Father, holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy.